The Broad Street Review podcast is teaming up with the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance's RestART initiative, bringing you conversations about how Philly arts organizations are surviving the COVID-19 crisis and the changes they're taking into the future. I'm your host, Darnell Radford. Broad Street Review is Philly's home for arts, culture, and conversation. We're a nonprofit online arts and culture journal serving the greater Philadelphia area since 2005. Today on the podcast, as part of our 8-part summer series collaboration with Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance's RestART initiative, our conversations continue with EgoPo Classic Theater as we explore how the organization has fared during the pandemic. Here is my interview with Katrina Foy, Managing Director of EgoPo Classic Theater. And welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Darnell Radford, and today I am in the virtual studio with EgoPo Classic Theater's Managing Director, Katrina Foy. Katrina, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Darnell. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. This is my first podcast,
well,
so this is exciting.
I hope it'll run smoothly. It will run smoothly. It'll run smoothly.
It will, yes.
I was thinking about the first time I met you, and it was an earlier it was an EgoPo show that was earlier in the pandemic. And can you say the name of that one again? Because it's long. It's a long name.
The Antel's Sad Stories of the Deaths of Queens,
Yes.
which is a Tennessee Williams short. And that was actually pre-pandemic.
Oh, wow,
I started at the organization in July.
Yes.
It was, yeah. I mean, we had a very full audience in that very small space at Asian Arts Initiative and Studio B that they Dane Eisler transformed into this beautiful rose petal space.
I love that.
And so that was in September. And so we still all had a few months before things changed.
It's so crazy when you think about it, how much we, as a cultural community, crammed into the fall season, like we normally do. We had Fringe, and then right after Fringe, most of our theater seasons really kick into high gear. And then there's various events as we get to the holidays. I remembered like one of the last things I did before the pandemic was the flower show. And also I think there was a media event for Wonder Spaces, that new art gallery in the Fashion District. And I was just thinking about like how, wow, there was so much going on. We had no idea, but I feel like the world was trying to like fit it in. I remember saying about the flower show, like they got so lucky.
Yeah, and I was new. I grew up in South Jersey, but then went away to college, and then I was in New York City for almost 10 years. And so coming back to EgoPo was a sort of homecoming for me. But I hadn't been in Philadelphia or in the surrounding area for quite a while. And so those first few months from July until, March, I guess we could call the official start, was sort of like a re-entry in me getting used to the organizations that were here and the breadth of producing here. I mean, talk about a flurry. It was just like, there's just so much amazing theater here. And so I was just getting up to speed. I was like getting in the rhythm. And then of course the rhythm just completely changed for all of us.
It started out as an intermission, and the intermission was extended for technical difficulties. And then it just seemed to keep going. And,
yeah, that's a funny way of putting it.
I made a joke that said, we will get everyone through the ladies because this intermission seems to be going
absolutely
for some time. Yes.
I have many a time have been in that ladies line.
Definitely. So tell us about EgoPo Classic Theater for those listeners who may be vaguely familiar, or just are wondering what you've been up to for the past few seasons.
Yeah. So EgoPo Classic Theater, it is still led by the founding artistic director, Lane Savidov, and the company is committed to re-envisioning timeless works of either theater or literature. We recently actually revisited our mission. It used to be classic, but in fact, we're centering on this word timeless, and that really feels right. And timeless in that these works that we unearth or may be hidden for various and sundry reasons. We bring them back to life, and they have cultural relevance here, and we sort of shine a light on that relevance. And we do it in a way that is immersive. And Lane uses this word eventness. You want to kind of walk into the space and feel like the world around you has been transformed. And then the other thing that makes EgoPo unique is that since coming to Philadelphia, the company landed itself in Philadelphia actually after another disaster, Hurricane Katrina. It was at that time that finding its place here in Philadelphia was the start of EgoPo adopting a seasonal structure. And producing multiple events for a subscriber base. And so the way that EgoPo structures its seasons is through a theme, which really allows the organization to take a deep dive approach into the way that it engages its audiences. And so some themes of the past have been theater of South Africa. There was a season devoted to the Lighty Breeze trilogy, was a 3-part series of works by John Guare. Previous to that, there was a Russian season. There was a Jewish season. I mean, I could go on. And since the pandemic, the themes have been meeting the moment in time. So last season was our season of isolations. We were reflecting on where our audience was at. We were all in our different places of isolation. And so our season kind of tiptoed out of that along with our audience. And I can go into that in a little bit more detail. I'm sure you have a question about this crazy season that we produced last year. And then this season is our season of awakenings. Again, taking a look at what's happening in this current, I don't even like to say post-pandemic. We are still in a pandemic world. And meet our audiences where they're at. So all of our shows are in this sort of sense of the characters are emerging or they're transforming within the arc of the story. And so yeah, it's a event theater, immersive, transformational theater that brings relevance and sort of a new lens to these classic timeless works of art.
And that's great. And there have been, over the years, many EgoPo productions that have definitely stayed with me for some time. There's a lot of a lot of Tennessee Williams earlier on. I remember, and the Lighty Breeze trilogy. I did experience all 3 parts, and even
good.
Even I think there was a talkback discussion that was about. I think it was the future of playwriting. I think now I'm gonna mess up with the title.
It could be. It was pre my time, so I'm not quite sure. But
yeah, there was a lot of energy around the theme, which I thought was really great, and just the transition of that space in order to tell the story, I thought was very creative too. I enjoy those moments. It's like you think about it, I guess the dance community tends to put a lot of effort into, a piece, like they'll focus on it for the whole year and then present it for a handful of days. And you can see how much work has been brought into it. And, those moments for EgoPo just made me think about, like, wow, what commitment to this. You're not thinking about how to just get out of, now we have this one going, we're on to the next, we're thinking about the next one behind the scenes. Like, we're still very much in this world. We're continuing to realize this world.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because we have discussions about, like, man, we that's the goal, right? Is to be able to sink your teeth into something over a longer period of time and let it flesh out and really get to the core. I think we always, as artists, want to spend as much time developing and creating a piece as you possibly can. We love the audience, and it's very much about that audience interaction. But that rich work often feels so short. But you're right that, in fact, and I never really looked at it this way, that the fact that we get to kind of deep dive over a season long, it is this sort of longer continued development process. And I haven't actually really thought about it that way, but that is certainly true, which makes it harder to kind of close the chapter at the end of a season and move on to the next one. We get very, I won't say attached, but we love that journey from end to end.
Yeah.
So, but each season is very exciting, and when we move on to the next one, it's because it's a result of a real, true inspiration that comes from the artistic leadership. Lane, he's a true visionary.
Yeah. So let's go back to the beginning of the pandemic. This intermission, when we thought it was a brief intermission.
We did. We were all like, "Oh yeah, we're going to take a pause, and we'll be back 2 weeks." Something along those lines.
Where was EgoPo's head at that time? Like, I can imagine that you were thinking about, planning the next season or putting the finishing touches on that. Probably finalizing some, grant opportunities in the winter times and all. Like, what was going on at the time for EgoPo?
Well, so much has happened. I had to kind of like reshift back to that time and be like, what was happening? We were in rehearsals. We had just finished up Fool for Love, directed by Brenna Geffers. And I think that closed on February 23rd. I remember that very distinctly because it's actually the day I moved into my house that I'm sitting in right now. And I think that was right around the start of the murmurs that were happening about this virus and this thing that was making people sick. And, we were hearing that it could be bad. I don't know. It was just the start. And then we started rehearsals for Curse of the Starving class not too long, maybe a week, 2 weeks after that. It was fairly quick. And then we got all the way through the rehearsal process. We were in our final run through before we would have started the tech process. And it was, and that was our final rehearsal. I think days before we had been sitting in a board meeting and kind of discussing, maybe we need to pause for now, but we decided to hold. And then I think it was the NBA, canceled the season. I think that was the thing. And that was like the first moment where I was like, oh, whoa, this is something. And then it became very clear very quickly in a matter of 24 hours that we needed to pause. And so, outside of needing to pause a production that was very, very close to opening and just absorbing that and trying to figure out, and then the world went into lockdown and we all shifted back home. And the office shut down very quickly. I mean, telling the same story that all others had to live some variation of. And I think what pre all of this taking place, we had been in season planning and looking towards yet another themed season. And we had also been in preparation for a very massive undertaking, an international collaboration, an international project in partnership with organizations in Indonesia that we then needed to, obviously that also had to be put on pause. And at the time we thought this would only last a couple of weeks, but the longer things went on, it became very clear that all of our planning was just going to be tossed up. And so everything that we had been, everything that the very clear picture of what the next 2 years was going to look like just completely changed. But like every other organization that loves this new word, pivot, we pivoted also very, very quickly. And our very first conversations, once we realized this was at least the foreseeable future, was how can we meet and serve right now? We did not want to be inactive. We took as much of a breath as we needed, but we also wanted to stay connected with our audience. And so we created a online virtual program, mostly educational. We did an online masterclass that was a monologue course that actually ran, I think at this point, maybe 5 or 6 times. It was incredibly popular and allowed us to reach a wider audience that otherwise we outside of Philadelphia and folks we would never have reached had we not chosen to do that. And we hosted a panel series incorporating voices from all over the country, and even international artists as well. And I don't remember the exact topics off the top of my head, but it was, things like how are we going to produce and come together as an international community and can continue to create art that is bold and risky, and what does producing look like in various places across the world right now as a result of the pandemic. And what else? I'm forgetting one of. And then Lane hosted a 7-part series on the art of directing, which was a real opportunity to show our audience in a different way what is EgoPo all about. It's one thing to come and see our shows. It's another thing to understand the process and the lens by which Lane chooses and then directs his pieces. And so that was, we saw that as an opportunity to just offer some more education about who we are at our core. So, I mean, I could go on and on.
No, this is.
I hope this is answering the question. I mean, it is very hazy. We've just come so far. We've changed. Everything's changed so much. So much of the clarity that we once had is just so challenged, and yet new clarity has come in other ways. It's like we're trying to extract all the positive from something that was just globally devastating.
I remember saying any kind of theater book that was written before this pandemic is kind of obsolete now. You think about all of Michael Kaiser's books. They were talking about a specific world that we were in. Like one of the last ones was I think called Curtains, where it was talking about was talking about like this newfangled like new media kind of thing, like the things that are going to change, like we're going to start seeing it foresaw some of the things that we ended up doing, but we were still not necessarily prepared. And there were many organizations that had this very traditional, very heartfelt mindset of like returning. We can't wait to invite you back to our space, where we do our best work. And so it is interesting to hear how the pivot had worked for so many, because even though we've had the technology, our organizations are non-profit organizations. So we have resources that we may or may not have, tapped into because we didn't have to, like the nature of just sitting around. Everyone that works with us was something that I don't want to say took for what we didn't take it for granted, but we were more accustomed to that, especially as small teams. And then now we have to figure out how to do this remotely. And it's a kind of technology that we don't necessarily embrace. We didn't have to, unless we were being technically creative on our stages. We weren't really seeing it in our administrative office.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a continued dialogue with the audience community, because as we continue emerging, we offered virtual access to Wine in the Wilderness earlier this season, but not for any of the other productions. And currently, we're not intending on offering it for next season. And it is a balance, right? Because as a small organization like EgoPo, we have to try to figure out, though we were committed to meeting our audience and where we were at in that time, and we wanted so much to stay connected in any way that we could, and we were able to then take those resources and take the mindset and just okay, we had a formula and now everything's off the table and everything's on the table. As we come back, we have to make some decisions. And I think that nothing is still ruled out, but I can see how some organizations want to go back to a place where they can do the work that they do in the best way. You know, from a resource standpoint, we can't compete with some of the organizations that are putting on these, like, you know, 4 camera, you know, recordings of and streaming them in the highest quality. You know, for us, it was bare bones, you know. So for us to be able to move forward in that way, the expectations from an audience standpoint are going to continue to increase. And we need to make sure that we're being smart about the way that we do use our resources. And that's in creating really visually immersive, engaging live theater performances, and staying on mission without. But then I also want to make sure that we're not cutting out audiences. So it's a balance. We have to figure out this question. I think it's still a question, and we haven't exactly answered it 100%. But I think it's still a consistent exploration we're all going to have to navigate as we emerge back into the pandemic, post-pandemic, whatever we want to call it, world.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Can you talk about some of the changes that you specifically encountered as managing director?
You said changes or challenges?
Well, changes and challenges.
Well, I think as challenges and changes. Well, so much changed from a funding standpoint. I felt that the foundation community was so incredibly supportive. So it was a positive change in a lot of ways, that they saw what we all needed as a community, and they met us where we were at. Particularly the Independence Foundation, William Penn Foundation, Wyncote Foundation. I mean, the list goes on. The challenge was we just couldn't predict anything. And, you know, we had been lucky to be in the middle of we had already had some guaranteed funding, but other organizations were not in those positions. And so again, that formula that we had been so reliant on and able to project into the future was just totally off the table. And that made it really hard to say, okay, what can we do? So that was a challenge. Not knowing when the end point was going to be, there was still this consistent expectation that, like, at some point this is going to come to an end, and maybe falsely. And so from an earned income standpoint, that was a huge challenge to try to figure out, you know, what could we rely on? When can we start even thinking about a return? And I think an opportunity and a challenge, again, there were just so many other opportunities that came up. The Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, of which we are, such a grateful recipient. New opportunities like that, the Illuminate the Arts Grant, that's city specific. And again, I'm probably forgetting so many of them. All of these opportunities that came up, it was an opportunity and a challenge to stay on top of it, because we needed all of those resources, and we needed to try to figure out how to apply and access all of those resources. And then for me, and I'll come back to some of the other challenges too, but I think, like, a real reality for a lot of people was that where there was perhaps for some people this distinction between personal and professional, the pandemic really brought those two worlds together. And so, you know, I am not ashamed to say that a big challenge for all of us at EgoPo, and I know I speak for a lot of people, was just how to manage keeping our organizations afloat while we had young children at home, while we were dealing with sickness, family members being sick, never knowing, you know, any step that we make, was COVID going to come into our homes? And so there's just so much turmoil, and then you're trying to function as a leader at the same time. So a lot of learning along that process. So that was obviously one of the greater challenges. I think now we're seeing it's hard to still hard to make predictions. The mentality of the buyer has certainly changed. We're seeing just a complete change in the timeline of when people are making decisions about their purchases. It's really scary still out there, and so I think those are some of the larger hurdles. Is just really just not knowing a lot of the things that we used to know.
Yeah.
But we really tried to look at it at the pandemic in any way. I say this sometimes, but you know how like Reno is like the biggest little city in the world. Like we tried to find the most positive out of the worst experience that all of us have lived through.
And I think
And
I
trying
think
to
there's been a lot of people who have found some positives in this situation too, and it's almost hard. You sort of want to keep them to yourself because there's a lot of complicated
suffering.
moments that have happened, and like there was a lot of loss that we dealt with too. But it is sort of a tough thing to even look back on yet. Like I don't even think I think a lot of art. Well, there were a lot of artists who were creative enough to kind of try to interpret the moment by creating some work that was very specific to the moment. But I don't even think we're there yet. I wouldn't be surprised that if 5 years from now we're going to have pandemic seasons. Like, remember when? Because those stories haven't been written yet. Like, we still have to make sense. We still have to make sense of what happened then, but we're living it now.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Was there a moment when you realized that this is affecting our community? This is affecting our community pretty hard. Like we're thinking about our organization as well, but like when you're thinking about whether people will come to your physical space to support the work, when did you realize, or was there any sort of significant moment where you said, this is really affecting the community? Like our patrons.
I think there was always this recognition of the best way that we can be there for our community is by being there. And conversations with donors. Yes. And we knew that the work that we could create and the connections that we could foster by way of what we know how to do best was going to be the biggest the biggest, what's the word I'm looking for? Support that we could offer as we all continue to be in this very complicated state of isolation and sort of paralysis almost. But I actually have to say the thing that we heard a lot from our season of isolations, our 2020-2021 season was deeply in service of our community. And we did probably one of the most ambitious seasons. We actually produced 4 events. One was by mail, MAIL, to 330 households across the country. The next was a adaptation of Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground that was offered virtually. And it was set during the MOVE bombings. It was adapted by Damian Wallace and Dean Eisler, and it was set during the MOVE bombings in the 1980s. Then we did a walk-up window piece in 3 locations of Sam Beckett's 10-minute piece, Rockabye. And our 4th was a drive-in of Adam Rapp's Nocturne in an abandoned parking lot in North Philadelphia. And I all of these pieces, like I said earlier, kind of tiptoed out of isolation slowly, going from nail to screen to window to car. And a lot of so our feedback, a lot of the how we know about our impact is from hearing directly from our audience members. And I still get responses and information about that season, about how impactful it was to be able to. So for instance, Rockabye, for a lot of people, that was the first live experience that they had so that was March of 2021. So that was the first experience, live theater, that they'd have in over a year. And it was deeply emotional for many of our audience members because they had been detached from that. You'd been looking at art on screen, and then suddenly you're in front of those eyes again, the connection, the raw connection of a live person, albeit through a window. And that connection, that feeling emerges. I myself lost it. I was crying like a baby because we had just been living in these shadows in this world of disconnection. And it was like, oh yeah. And so when we thought about how can we serve people right now, that was what we were hoping to be able to do, is through the work.
Yeah.
And I hope we reached, and touched people and reminded people of the power of theater and of live producing.
Yeah. I was thinking about when the Kimmel Center did their big launch, like the return to public events, and we're all crammed in Verizon Hall, and they say, welcome back to your Philadelphia orchestra, and it was the longest applause, and everyone in the room, we were just looking around like it was this moment where we're kind of like, we did it, like what did we do? We did. But it was that excitement, like I never thought I'd be around all of these people again, because even the attempts were trying to keep us safe by like distancing us, not having as many people, like being outside if possible, but like to be in a space again was was like an amazing sign. And I definitely paid attention to the thought process of organizations that were trying their best to sort of operate as if we are back, but we're back with all of the provisions in place to keep us safe. And so it was like riding this line of sort of telling everyone we're back, but also how do we weave in that we upgraded our filtration system? How do we let them know that we have good air circulation? Yeah. We've always had good air circulation.
Like we want them to forget about this stuff just for like this blip moment, but we also have to let you know all of the things that we're doing to keep you safe. I did want to also say that in terms of going back to your last question, like how through the suffering, how do we serve our community? And there's the audience community, but then one of the things that we talked about a lot about was the artist community. And that work for so many of our artists was completely shuttered. And that producing work during this time was also a way to make sure that we were putting money in the hands of the artists, that a lot of people can pivot and self-create. Some can't. And so that was also a big consideration of like, we can produce. We had the benefit of not bringing bricks and mortar. We did not have the overhead that other organizations were managing throughout the pandemic. We had the benefit of flexibility because of that. And so we could make the choice to produce. And in doing so, we really wanted to serve the artists. And, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but I think we provided like 50 to 75 artists worth of, contracts that season when most theaters were shuttered. And so that was another way that we saw our role within the Philadelphia community, because we have this ability, we should, and let's do this.
Do you think it was do you think the smaller companies had a greater opportunity in the moment? Because that was something I thought of too. Not having the brick and mortar means that you can be more creative than someone who is like, like a PTC or a Wilma who has a space where it's like, we can't just go outside on our, right out front of our building. We have this building, like we need to sustain as well. That do you think it was a
I think it's
better?
a case of, I don't know. I can't say better or worse. I think it's just different
Yeah.
opportunities. That you take a look at like what's in front of you, and you say, okay, maybe we can't produce in the way that we're used to, but we can do
Mm-hmm.
X. And Paige at PTC was at the lead of leading the community conversations that were desperately
Mm-hmm.
needed, both for artists and audience, to just keep people connected and to be able to dialogue and have conversations. And so I think each organization did what they could do with what we were all facing. And we just all had to make different choices. So I can't say better or worse. I think we all did what we needed to do. And I think that's what artists do, is we try to look at a challenge and we say, what's the opportunity here?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah. And I have to give so many artists credit because some amazing work came out of the pandemic. So again, you don't want to look at the pandemic as this positive thing. It's terrible,
Yeah.
but it also allowed us all to just take a step back and revisit the
Mm-hmm.
possibilities.
You touched on the foundation support, and then the various programs that spun up during the pandemic to support us, like the shuttered venues,
Mm-hmm.
and illuminate the arts. Did you feel adequately supported at the time? And as you're looking at the coming season, do you feel adequately supported moving into this new season?
I did feel supported, most definitely. We, we were in a unique position because we could produce, that we could still pursue certain grants and funding for our projects, because we were able to move forward with a full season. I think that the foundations alleviating some of the reporting that can become very time consuming, that allowed us to managers to refocus our efforts and resources and time to seek out other funding opportunities, and to make sure that we were all managing our organizations very well was huge. And then the new programs that emerged in direct support of funding both the organizations and the artists was overwhelming. So I do think that the funding community, in so many ways, met the moment. Right now, as we look forward, I know we're it's a tough question. I think I feel very supported. I think the organization has been very supported. I feel like I would need more time to think about that.
That's okay.
We are so proud to be an Arts and Culture Hub grantee for the new program out of the William Penn Foundation for the next 3 fiscal years. And, that's a new program within their creative communities that's emerged during the pandemic era. And, that has been a huge support, and has emerged at the same time when EgoPo went into our new strategic planning process. And it just so much is becoming clear about the role of EgoPo, and also I really love the new guidelines under the creative communities and about the how organizations across not just the arts but organizations can work together to really create a community that is supportive of its constituents, and that there's more collaboration that can be found. And I think that the arts and culture program really supports and promotes that. Yeah, I need more time to think about that one.
We'll
We're
return
still
to that
putting,
in a few months.
yeah.
Is there anything? Is there anything particular that you need to hear from the leaders in our industry at this time, that would either give you confidence, guidance, a through point that you haven't heard yet? If they're listening and wondering what you need to hear from them.
I think that what we need to see both at the city and state level. I think our foundations already are hearing this, is that the arts need to be very well funded, that we are a essential part of the economy and of the well-being of this community as we all continue to recover, and that because there is still so much that the arts community is trying to figure out as we emerged, that the support needs to be there to help us get through it. That there are trends that are still scary, and so yeah, I think that that support needs to come in a way that is supportive of large, mid, small, and independent artists, and that just because we're emerging doesn't mean that the support is no longer necessary. And if those leaders can hear us, and I know that there are leaders out there really working tirelessly to support the arts and to get the funding that is needed. But it's essential for EgoPo that we have a way forward and that we know a little bit more about what to expect, so that we can plan, so that we can invest in the future as opposed to moving minute by minute and day by day.
Yeah.
So yeah, in very broad strokes, that's what I would say.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice if every organization just sort of received a base level of funding from somewhere? It's like, here's your bottom. And
are you talking about a universal
basic income? Thank you for being a
yeah. How dare you?
Let's keep you afloat, because I mean, if you think about it, yeah, I mean, it is. I guess they try to justify that that's how some of this funding is sort of divvied out. That's what it's designed to do, kind of create these cultural spaces, but it's not balanced. It doesn't always reach everywhere that it needs to reach, and it's not always as accessible. And I definitely think of the smaller theater companies that are fiscally sponsored, who don't have access to, some of the foundations that you mentioned. They're not quite there yet. And it's like, what kind of support can they look forward to? Like I hope someone is thinking about, like, it doesn't have to be a crisis to realize, like, a fresh organization starting out needed support from the start. And, not
Yes.
just mom and dad's initial seed money, when you form your company, but like, as soon as you check all these boxes, it's like, boom, here's a pot. And I guess as we're thinking about it, the Philadelphia Cultural Fund here, which we seem to be continuously fighting for what little bit of
Yes.
money that is. It's like, how dare you? Come on. I could.
Hey, well, you said it. This is why I pause, and I'm like, you come back to me. I know
I
that
was at the rally.
there's these things are very
Yes.
complex. And to be
Yeah.
perfectly honest with you, I wish I had more capacity to be a better advocate.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. And that's full transparency. And so I can't speak for and speak as a like a well, I can't put words in the mouth of those who are literally on the ground and who have been fighting for that
Mm-hmm.
funding. And so there are far better people than me to speak more eloquently about, like what foundations can really do to support. I know what we, need. But I think that there are bigger things at stake. And so, I would say, yeah, the Philadelphia Cultural Fund really needs to, and it's not it's not the fund itself. The city needs to commit and to fund and increase and really see how the impact on the arts has a long-term ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
Long term. And so for this question to come up every single year, and for the cultural fund to be in constant annual question about how it's going to be able to fund the artists that it funds every single year, for there to be these continuous question marks is just it's not it is not meeting us where we're at, and it's not meeting us in the moment. So, I actually sat down today and thought, and, putting my plan in place and getting a handle on things. And I thought, man, I have absolutely no idea what next year with the PCF looks like. And that's a great challenge. So yeah, we'll be okay. But there are smaller organizations and other organizations that really rely on those funds. And this is just one example, so, really committing and communicating and investing in the arts, because we're here to stay. We're not going anywhere. We're resourceful, but man, could you resource us? That would be really great.
I mean, they want to see that resilience. That was one of my questions for you, which you've already answered by talking about the move bombing event, the walk-up window piece, the drive-in, like all of that is, those are examples of creativity and resilience. I think that those are just great ideas that, oh, wow. Yeah. I don't know did we have these ideas beforehand, or are we just meeting the moment? And
it's insane. Lane is insane. And I say insane in the best way. And you should have been a fly on the wall for some of the conversations that we had when we were in season planning. And I'm like, you want to do what? But that's sort of the great relationship between an artistic leader and a managing director is, here's you looking over the field and saying, here's what's possible. And here's me down here, like clearing out the fields. And so I was happy to move alongside Lane and just, he saw what was possible and what we could do and what we needed to do. And, so very, very proud of that.
Were there any ideas or were there any ideas that had to be tabled, or were there any tough choices that had to be made, during this time?
Ooh.
I mean, it sounds like you were able to be pretty creative, which is great. But I imagine that creativity came out of some tough choices that had to be made.
Yeah, I mean, I think the toughest choice was just knowing that we all still, as a community and as a team, had a lot to balance while we were also producing. And so the challenge was just how to make sure that we're balancing it and taking self-care. I mean, the greatest challenge was that we were producing and still in the middle of a pandemic. And so we had an extreme eye towards the safety and care of artists and audience while we were producing. So I guess that was, part of the challenge, but also, what we had to do. But in terms of tough choices that need to be made, I don't actually think it was a tough choice to produce. I don't. We had the ability to do so. We knew we could do it. And we wanted to do it both for artists and audience. I think the tough choices are actually moving forward because, again, we still are still weathering what next, what now, what can we count on, what do we know, what do we not know, and what kind of creativity is going to be called upon that we can't anticipate because we're trying to go back to not life as we knew it, but a new world. And one that somewhat resembles what used to be before, and yet there's still so many things that need to shift and adjust. And so I think some of the decisions that will need to be made have still yet to come.
Yeah. Because we're here on the East Coast, we have this sort of vantage point where we can focus more directly on New York and Broadway, as opposed to an organization in Kansas per se. Do you take any of what is happening in New York as sort of a guidepost, or just a resource that helps you think a little bit clearer about what's going on based on sort of the decisions and choices that they're making?
Well, I think we kind of we had two hats on there. We were aware of, and if you're talking about specifically like guidelines in terms of how they were handling audiences and producing, and and COVID specifically, I think that we were aware, and there was somewhat of a guidepost because we knew that many of our audience members would be engaging with and knowledgeable about those as guideposts, and so there was an expectation. We had to think about the consumer mentality, what people were going to be expecting, but then at the flip side, we could and we did take a strong stance about, we were one of the organizations that joined the list of proof of vaccination only, masks wearing, throughout the season, even in Curse of the Starving class, which we just closed on this past Sunday. Masks are still required, and so is proof of vaccination. Yeah. That we could. One hat was being aware and letting it be somewhat of a guidepost, but then also being able to make independent decisions based on what our organizational needs are. And we knew, and partially why we were motivated to be a little bit more strict, is just because we are a smaller organization. We needed to make sure that we could manage it well. And so we had to be able to enforce things where maybe an organization with more resources might have been able to be a little more lenient because they could manage that. Yeah. We had to make sure that we were keeping people safe with the resources we had to be able to manage effectively. So, yeah, I mean, was it a guidepost? Sure. Did that ultimately make our decisions? Did we decide to change course just because Broadway would change its mind? No. Yeah.
Do you have an abundance of COVID compliance officers now? I feel like everyone is a COVID compliance officer now.
Well, technically, I am a COVID compliance officer. I mean, right. So it's this funny thing. Like and I don't say funny to diminish the importance of it. We very much valued having a person who was an independent
arbiter.
Yes, thank you. For making sure that people were safe and that we were following guidelines, that they were being followed in-house, and bringing things to our attention that as we're managing things over here, that there was a critical eye on making sure that people were safe. I don't know what the future of the CCO role
Mm-hmm.
is. I would like to think that whether that exists in perpetuity for however long, that the value of really, to me, I look at it as care and that extra eye towards making sure people are well taken care of. And I think we learned quite a lot about listening and giving people the space to be able to voice their concerns about their own well-being. That happened to be COVID specific, but I think as an organization and as a community, the role of just an overall, give that extra eye of attention to keep everyone balanced and in check.
Mm-hmm.
I take that away as a positive from the role of the CCO, and also it has its place.
Yeah.
Do we have an abundance of CCOs? I very much wanted to use the same person all the way through, just because, like the more CCOs you have, the more exposure you have. And so I was always like, let's get some one person, but that didn't always happen. But I think the role is certainly has its value. And I don't know what the future of that role is as we continue to emerge.
Yeah.
But I took the training myself. And you did.
So did I.
Yes.
I think we'll wrap up with this one. What makes what is a continued example of your organization's relevance through all of this, and as you're moving forward?
Well, a continued example of our relevance as we move forward. Well, I think, as I mentioned before, we just came out of our strategic planning, and one of the things that came out of that is a revisiting of our mission. That the timelessness of the works that we create, that now our season is not officially announced, so I can't really share it here for the purposes of, but stay tuned for more information on our season, which will be released very, very soon. That we recognize, and that it wasn't clearly articulated within our mission, is that we have, I think, an opportunity and a responsibility also within producing timeless classic works, that we can uncover works that haven't necessarily made their way into the mainstream or the definition of the classic canon. And that is a great opportunity to bring to light voices, stories that represent a much wider, diverse community than sometimes the classic canon is defined as. And so I find the relevance of the organization to be within that. We have an exciting couple of seasons coming up, so I encourage you to visit our website, EgoPo.org, and that it is in the sharing of those voices and the sharing of those stories that our relevance is found in truly connecting people across cultures and across communities. And that's a wide range. We tend to be very myopic about the way that we think about either diversity or cultural connection. And I think that as an organization, we are trying to broaden those definitions in the work that we produce and in the connections that we create with that work. And so I'll sort of leave it there.
Yeah. Oh, I almost forgot before I let you go. Tell us how the Restart initiative has benefited and
Oh my
supported
gosh.
EgoPo Classic Theater.
Oh, this is yes. Well, first of all, the Restart program is through the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance, which has been also an incredibly supportive agency for EgoPo and for organizations in Philadelphia throughout the pandemic. And this program specifically, I saw it at I saw the first round. They had 2 rounds, and I saw the first round, and I was like, we're so small, and I don't know that we can manage participating in a program like this. So I was like, oh, maybe this is not the right time, and maybe this is not for us. And then, ironically, right when I was on maternity leave, I decided that was the best time to join the program. And because the more information I learned about it, the more I was like, this is exactly what we need. And as a small organization, we don't. We have a small, marketing budget. And we tend to visit, use the same resources and invest in the same outlets. And I wanted to know more about what our possibilities were. I wanted to know more about how we reach audiences and diversify our audiences and reach different communities. I wanted to know more about how we can use our limited resources and were we using our resources in the best way? For us, again, we're small, so we don't have like a ton of data to be able to say this is the return on this on these dollars through this outlet in a way that converts to a ticket sale in the best way. You just it's very, very hard to quantify. So I wanted to know what the possibilities were. And I saw the Restart program as just a great way to take a couple of risks and a couple of chances. And and I have to say, it was absolutely an outstanding program. Cabria helped us throughout the entire journey and didn't just hand us the program and the budget and say, go to. She really helped us craft a plan and helped us to execute it. And so, in addition to the resource dollars that were there, they were also an administrative and sort of strategic resource, and it was invaluable. And so we learned a lot. We took a lot away from it. That, in fact, there are so many other outlets that we can. You don't have to invest massive amounts of money in. We can start small and incremental and make it manageable for us so that it's consistent over time. And I think that's the goal, is to maintain that consistency so that we can start to learn more about the audiences that we're attracting to our shows. And what's a challenge for EgoPo is it's an opportunity and a challenge at the same time, right? Because we theme our seasons, we have an opportunity every single year to directly reach out to a community that would be the most interested in this particular theme. But then when we move on to the next season, it's harder to retain those audiences. And so we almost have to work sort of extra hard in order to keep people coming back. And so as we learn more about that process, we want to just make sure that we're getting the word out there, and then we're learning more about how exactly do we keep those audiences in our doors year over year. And so we're just chipping away at it. We took a lot away from this experience with the Restart program. I've been super thrilled with it. I hope they do it again. I hope that's the plan. And so we couldn't be more grateful to be a part of it.
Yeah. We're definitely grateful to the Restart initiative too. We're happy to be a part of this part of it, of identifying and showcasing the organizations in the Restart initiative too. I thought it was a great idea as soon as it came across our inbox. Yes. This is it's very much an idea that I had been kicking around before earlier in the pandemic. I said, I would love to talk, because my focus was theater, came from theater, and I'm saying, my focus is, I want to talk to more cultural organizations about how they're just dealing with this, but not just specifically because of this moment, but thinking about those things that are not as glamorous, but are as necessary to keep our organizations afloat. Like, who wants to nerd out about development? Like, really? Me.
Yeah, and what I think is really smart about this particular program is that it wasn't necessarily it's direct. When you ask about like how are we feeling supported,
Hmm.
this wasn't direct influx of cash into our operating, but it was at the same. It wasn't right, but it was specific. It was like, yes, you can have these funds, but it has to be within this, and so you take away from this experience. It forced us to really focus on this area for a second as a and I think that was really smart. And 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 yeah, I love more programs like that where it is a financial resource to the organization, but that it is specific, so that it almost forces smaller organizations to learn in key areas that otherwise can sometimes be easily your attention can get diverted while you're putting out fire over here or fire over here. This really allowed us to sink our teeth into asking, like, what are the other possibilities? So I really appreciate the focus and hope they bring it back.
Yes. One more quick thing. As we're at the end of a season, as we are beginning a new season, what can our listeners do to support or continue to support EgoPo Classic Theater?
Well, please visit our website, egopo.org. The best thing that you can do right now, and I think this is EgoPo, but this is all organizations, is we are in like season announcement time. The best thing you can do to support EgoPo is subscribe to the season. Join us and commit to joining us. Let us know that you're with us throughout the season. Join us as a member. Which means that you're also become a donor to the organization at the same time as you get to join us for all of our season events, and just stay in touch. Go on our website and register to get our emails and stay in touch with us. But really, those joining us as a subscriber or a member right now is one of the most critical things that people can do to support their organization, so that we know that we can look forward to the future of very full and safe houses in 22-23.
All right. That's Katrina Foy, Managing Director of EgoPo Classic Theater. Thank you for taking the time to tell us a little bit about the COVID journey. This pandemic journey.
There's so much missed, but this is
there's
great
so much there. Yes, thank you so much. This was a great
so
thorough, and there are many signs of a resilient organization here. I hope people sort of caught those moments and will visit egopo.org and continue to make sure that organizations like EgoPo Classic Theater continue to thrive and exist here in our community. Katrina, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. This was truly a pleasure.
Thank you, Darnell. You too.
And of course, once that season is announced, I hope you will come back to Broad Street Review and tell us about that season. And we look forward to hearing about that. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to RestART with BSR, presented by the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance and the Broad Street Review podcast. Want to get involved with Broad Street Review? Head on over to our website at www.broadstreetreview.com to read, subscribe to our weekly newsletters, learn about writing for BSR, or become a supporter. Our readers' donations keep us running. Join the BSR conversation on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at BroadST Review. Thanks for being part of our community.